got back jogging. And actually, this is when I came across the Maffetone stuff. I was sitting on an airplane and I pulled up, you've interviewed Mark Allen, and just this United Airlines magazine, I think, changed my life. Because I picked, you're just flipping through it, 3 days in Portugal or something, and then, some wine review. And then there's this article, it was called Get Fast, Run Slow. And it was written by Mark Allen. I think that was the name of it. But it was about the Maffetone method. And it was Mark Allen. You could link to that show.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it was his story about pretty much getting that Gump moment after he had lost 6 Ironmans to Dave Scott, and then he went out and found the shaman, Phil, and and I'm listening, and kind of going to Yoda, and he talked about his progression with the MAF heart rate, and I'd never heard of a heart rate. I had heard of them, but I'd never used one, and they were pretty bulky at the time, and so I went and got one, and beep beep beep,
Yeah, that must have been such an eye-opening experience for you as well.
I started jogging again, because I pretty much ignored most doctors' advice through my life because I am a doctor and I realize most of our advice is wrong. So when the doctor said not to run, it's kind of almost like you assume that the opposite's true. No offense to doctors, but we learn the treatment paradigm. We never learn how to kind of cure the mechanics or the biology, and that's just the way it is. Yeah, so I slowed down and my progression was steady, so I think, and to describe the Maffetone method is you take 180 minus your age. I was 30 at the time, so I set it at 150, and you start jogging, and as soon as it
And
goes over
did you
150, slow
sorry,
down.
did you adjust it at all with
No, I
anything at
didn't
that
know
point?
any of the fancy. I don't
Yeah,
think it didn't. I just read that article. I didn't
yeah,
buy any books or
yeah,
anything.
yeah,
I
yeah.
just read that article and said that sounds interesting. Bought some $50 heart rate monitor, chest strap, and went to my local park. And it was like, I don't know, 11-minute-ish mile, grandma running by me and it's beeping. And I think, you interview people, Floris, that, were competitors and they have that kind of brain, So for people that are competitors, I probably am one, we're all type A. And that's because that's kind of why we ran, it's why we run in college and race, because we have that it's in our genes, right? We just want to go do that. So it's very difficult for people like that to slow down. And but I was drinking the Kool-Aid. I'm like, well, if Mark Allen's doing this, and it made sense. It made complete sense. Like that just makes too much sense. So, and and it seemed like a good idea at the time just to slow me down. Because I'm recovering from surgery, and it's like, well, this is all good. And so I progressed from like 11-minute mile at heart rate 150 to pretty close to a 6-ish minute mile over the course of probably 4 months. And just running around this little park in Denver. Didn't know anything about the shoes yet, but then I lined up at the Marine Corps Marathon that fall, and for the Air Force, I had kind of waved it off, but there was an injury, and they called me up like a week before if I wanted to run, and I said sure, but I haven't done any workouts. I don't know how I'm going to do because I had no idea what I would do in like a race or anything, and it was just a weird experience because I went out and. So at that time, I'm running like a 6-minute-ish mile at a heart rate of 150, jogging around this park in Denver. And I hit halfway in like 115 in that race, a big race, like 30,000 people. And it was weird. Like usually I used to run these marathons. Usually you're working a little bit halfway, and you're kind of hanging on, maybe by 16 or 18, if you're running it on sugar, you're kind of just hanging on for dear life. But I hadn't even felt like I started running yet. It was weird. And at around mile 15, I'm like, this just feels like super crazy. And I like picked it up and, ran the back half in like 112, 113 and finished in third place in like 228 something, 228.05. But what was crazy, Floris, was, you finish these things and you're like flat out most of the time. You're like, I'm done. And, I finished that and I felt like I could do it again. And I think that's really the message. So training, I think if you're someone listening and, training is like an adapt. So maybe race day, you wouldn't necessarily think you could do it again. But if you finish a training run and you don't think you could do that again, you've probably training too hard.